Good morning. We're going to call this meeting of the TRPA Transportation Committee to order, pound, pound. The date is April 24th, 2024, and the time is 9:17. First item on the agenda is the roll call to determine quorum. Mara?
No, excuse me, I don't mean to cut you off.
Yes? Oh, I don't think they meant to unmute.
Ms. Bowman?
Here.
Mr. Bass?
Here.
Ms. Hayes?
Here.
Ms. Hill?
Here.
Mr. Honigman?
Here.
Madam Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you. And please note for the record that Ms. Bowman is here for Secretary of State Cisco Aguilar. I know that public commenters had asked for that and for us to make that note in the future. Thank you very much. We will now go over the remote and in-person meeting rules for today. For the members of the public who are joining us remotely to observe the meeting, go to trpa.gov under the calendar heading, click on Governing Board Hybrid Meeting for the April 24th, 2024 meeting. You'll find a link to the public webinar hosted on Zoom. To address the committee members directly with your comments, raise your hand in Zoom by clicking raise hand at the bottom of your screen. For the appropriate agenda item with your raised hand, you will be unmuted. TRPA staff by TRPA staff have 3 minutes to address the committee. If you have used the dial-in numbers to join us by telephone today, you can dial *9 to raise your hand and be unmuted. For items that are agendized as informational only, we will hear public comment during the general public comment period at the end of the meeting. Comments on items agendized for action or possible action, we will hear public comment before the committee takes any action. To remote committee members, if you wish to speak, raise your hand in Zoom and you'll find the hand icon on the bottom of your screen. Remote committee members may not use the chat box to make any comments or to have sidebar conversations. Please, everyone, remember to mute your mic unless speaking to cut down on background noise. Finally, I would like to ask that all remote members turn on their cameras if they are able. Members of the public who have joined us in person, please use the sign-in sheets at the back of the room to indicate which item you are making comment on. At the appropriate time for public comment on an agenda item, please line up at the podium to speak. Committee members who are in person, please raise your hand if you wish to comment and speak clearly into the microphone in front of you. If you're viewing the webinar on a personal computer, please ensure that your microphone and speakers are turned off to prevent audio feedback in the room. Next is the approval of the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda, Mr. Haven?
No changes.
Oh, thank you,
Madam Chair.
Great. We will deem the agenda approved as posted or as posted. Approval of the minutes. We are now on item 2, approval of the minutes. We have a draft set of minutes from February 28, 2024 on page 17 of your packet. Does any member of the committee wish to make a change? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes as presented and or amended. Do I see Mr. Bass has signed it?
So moved.
Okay. Thank you very much. And do we need a roll call vote on this? No. Okay. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say nay. Okay. I think that passed unanimously. We will move now to item 3, presentation and possible direction of the Transportation Committee draft 2024-2025 work plan to include the 2050 Regional Transportation Plan update, RTP funding framework, and VMT threshold funding milestones. And this is found on page 379 of your packet. And I look to our executive director to kick this off.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee and staff and the public. I'm Julie Reagan, TRPA's Executive Director, and I will be turning this over to Michelle Glickert, who will walk you through this work plan. I just wanted to offer some contextual comments as we begin and take you back to the last few months in board discussions around the policy related to vehicle miles traveled. And we committed to discuss that in the context of the Transportation Committee this month. And it really is embedded and in parallel with the update of the Regional Transportation Plan. And John Hester is on vacation, so he is usually our executive lead for this committee that works in tandem with the staff. So I'm sure he'll be glad to tell me what I got wrong in this discussion as I give you kind of the big picture. We'll argue about that when he gets back. But I just wanted to really look at the big picture as part of this discussion. If you think of the compact as our constitution in the basin and the bi-state governance, and then the compact directing us to achieve environmental standards, we call them the environmental threshold carrying capacities. VMT is a new standard in that department, and it also directs us to have a regional plan to achieve and maintain those thresholds. Well, there's a transportation element in that big regional plan, which covers everything, from land use to vegetation and forest health. The transportation element then, because we're an MPO, which we have now been for 25 years, that directs us to do this regional transportation plan. So it really all is in service of achieving our environmental goals for the region, achieving the regional plan, which fulfills our mission in the compact. So I wanted to connect those dots. And so then the VMT policy lives within that system. And when we update the regional plan, which we are doing, and we'll be bringing an item to the full board next month on the official kickoff of the update of the regional transportation plan, we will be talking about all the projects that live within that, what they cost, and that's the financial element. And the dollars affect the policy for ongoing funding. So it's very much linked together. What the cost of the RTP is, which today is about $2.5 billion roughly, really affects overall how we achieve our goals to reduce vehicle miles traveled, to reduce greenhouse gases, and to support the environmental goals for the region. And of course, that's intrinsically linked to quality of life and livability in Lake Tahoe. So just with that big picture context in mind, we're going to dig into the work plan, which gets pretty detailed. I just wanted to start that out before Michelle takes us through the plan. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Reagan. Next slide, please. So the proposed work plan I'm going to be going over highlights the two focus areas for the committee and a linkage between the update of the 2025 Regional Transportation Plan Sustainable Community Strategy. We're going to be referring to that as the RTP or the RTP-SCS throughout this. It's going to show you that linkage between the 2025 RTP and the financial element within it and the need to review and update the regional plan funding policies together. The draft work plan will strike a balance between the immediate need to revisit the current funding plans and policies while avoiding the inefficiency in developing a short-term solution to current issues separately from the RTP update. Next slide, please. So here's the nice framework. Oh, I should have came in this room a little early today. That's a bit bright on the screen. I'll be walking you through the framework to help you understand the tasks needed to complete the regional transportation plan. And I'm going to go into detail on each of these elements and drill down into where the committee will be specifically engaged and how we will be accelerating with you the tasks to provide the regional plan policy update as well. Next slide. So beginning the technical work is how, the RTPS starts off. And I want to walk you through the two largest pieces of that technical piece. And the first of those is our forecast. As you know, the RTP-SCS is a long-term planning document. It lays out the vision for building out our transportation system 20 plus years from now. So to do so, we have to look back at a forecast, which is our community. I'm sorry, forgive me. We need to forecast what our community will look like 20 years from now. We generate a new forecast every time we update the RTP. And to do so, we look at past trends and demographics, the rate of development in our region, and we try to forecast what the future is going to look like. You may remember, I think you two were with us, the last time we were developing this forecast, it was right before COVID hit. So we have a tough job ahead of us and we do our best. The forecast includes everything from socioeconomic data like population, land use assumptions, day and overnight visitation, along with employment. We bring all this information to the committee for your review in order to feed our modeling and forecast efforts. So this is just a snapshot from the last RTP. You might be able to see here how the outputs include VMT and greenhouse gas emissions, among other things. Next slide. So the second piece of that technical work relates to the travel demand model. This is a true Dan Segan slide, as you can see on my right here. I have full support. We use a travel demand model called TransCAD. That's one of the most common in the industry, and we've used it since 2005. What travel demand models do in the broad sense is it takes land use and demographic data, all the things I just spoke of. We also look at those land use things, like how many restaurants do we have? What are those commercial development pieces? We combine that information about how then people travel, which we get from surveys that tell us how likely someone is to drive to work and what time do they leave. It also talks about, are they going to do a stop at the coffee shop on the way to work? So we combine all of that, the counts on our roadways. The travel demand model basically works backwards. We then have a number of trips that we have to disseminate over the network. So if there's 10,000 car trips on Highway 50 on a given day, the model helps us understand where those travel, where people are actually traveling to and where those trips are ending. So every time we develop an RTP, we update our travel demand model. We recalibrate it based on latest information and traffic counts. For this RTP, we're using a 2022 base year, our most recent data that we have, and we're going to recalibrate everything according to that data. We'll be validating it, of course, in accordance with Federal Highways Administration and state requirements. In addition, and I'm excited to say some of the upgrades we've made to the travel demand model will include, for the first time, we're incorporating the quality of bike and pedestrian infrastructure into the model that helps with those travel choices, as well as the second being using big data to help us recalibrate those travel patterns, which we've been really interested in since we'd like to match up since post, sorry, I'm fumbling a little bit. I'm trying to go as fast as chairwoman. Recalibrate travel patterns to better match a COVID environment. Like we know we've seen a little bit of that change in travel behavior, and we'll be upgrading our model to start and capture that. Next slide. A major component of the RTP development is engagement. And so here's just a look at the engagement completed from the last regional transportation plan. We kicked that off over the summer of 2019. We had about 40 plus stakeholder meetings, and then we moved online in the winter of 2020 and engaged over 480 participants and had over 2,300 views on our project web pages. So while we're required to complete the RTP every 4 years, the work really doesn't stop. Our public participation plan, which Kara Richardson will be speaking to in a few minutes, covers all of the outreach we do and is on a similar schedule as the RTP. Some highlights here from previous plan that not only included that RTP outreach, but many of our other plans and programs like the active transportation plan, which is also on the agenda today at the full board. Next slide. So now on to the important policy updates as part of your work plan. A part of the RTP update will be refining and revising the regional transportation plan goals and the many policies we have. We're doing that currently over the next couple of months, and we're considering our recent planning work on the Vision Zero safety strategy and active transportation plan, as well as equity plan that we've completed. And we'll also be thinking about, of course, all of the changes since the last RTP, demographics, land use changes, et cetera. The second element here on the page is the element includes reviewing and updating the regional plan funding policies in our development and implementation goal of the regional plan. These specific funding policies and milestones were developed with the last regional transportation plan financial needs and our priority projects in mind. We need to revisit the current funding landscape and forecast for the next RTP to complete this policy update. Next slide. An important component of the RTP SES is that identification I just mentioned of those projects to implement the vision and to coordinate transportation investment in the region. The project list is developed in close coordination with implementation partners. It relies heavily on targeted planning documents like the active transportation plan. The projects included in the RTP SES have been identified by partners and also TRPA staff. They've all had a level of planning completed that can provide a project description and estimated cost. This all folds into the regional transportation plan, and TRPA staff and partners maintain the project list in the EIP tracker to support that work. It's on an ongoing basis. We keep the project list updated with all necessary details on expenditures and construction timeframes. The EIP tracker also provides that transparency and public facing information for interested, those from the public interested in learning more about the proposed projects or what's underway currently. I'm excited to share that I get the opportunity to share our tool with other MPOs at a national conference coming up in 2 weeks. Another component, next slide, thank you. Another component of the RTP-SES is the financial element that contains funding assumptions for the 25-year life of the plan. The reasonable foreseeable funding assumption is coordinated with local government, state, federal, and private partners to affirm the assumed funding in our plan. This table with the local funding shown as an example shows you the level of detail that's actually included in the financial element of the RTP. TRPA staff is currently meeting with partners to confirm existing funding and future possible funding to include in the updated financial element. In June, staff will be providing a financial landscape presentation to this committee. We'll be providing a snapshot of transportation funding invested in 2023. This foundational information will help provide a basis for discussion around new transportation funding necessary to implement the next RTP. The draft financial element will be brought back to you in October. Next slide. I'll be going over a timeline at the end as well and hitting those milestones. So last but not least in those elements of the RTP, we have an extensive environmental review that has to be completed. So we start with technical studies like greenhouse gas reductions, trip reduction strategies, and looking at how those affect our travel choices. After preliminary analysis, there's internal reviews and subsequent analysis as needed. So we have sort of a feedback loop in our review process. And then, of course, the development of our final draft and final document. Next slide. So as discussed back in March, the process of updating the RTP and the regional plan funding policy will include the Transportation Performance Technical Advisory Committee. Those are those two green and grayish boxes up there, as well as the Transportation Implementation Collaborative. We're working closely with them on project needs and the funding forecast today. While we work with those two working groups, staff will be coming back to this committee over the next year, and about every other month is sort of the schedule for this committee. So we have a continual feedback loop with this committee and the others shown here. Eventually, when we get to the regional plan funding and RTP policy updates, we'll be going to the regional plan committee as well. Next slide, thank you. Tracy's on it. I don't even have to say next slide anymore. Here is the committee schedule. These are the big milestones for the committee. June will be a nice full one, as you can see here. We have information items to be endorsed and some action needed, as well as August. We'll be then focusing on the RTP-SES policies and goals. And in October, we'll move into those technical pieces, as I mentioned, on land use and demographics. And then the ever important financial element of the RTP that will set us up for updating the regional plan funding policies in February. So the overall approval of the RTP will be coming in the later summer months. So today we would like to make sure that we're on the right track with the draft work plan approach, the RTP development and VMT policies moving forward at the same time while accelerating where possible. The timeline was requested in March, so it's important that we have the discussion today. Our plan is to finalize this with the committee when we meet in June. Folding back in also our May board retreat as well and information that we have there. The approval of the work plan will authorize staff ultimately to begin working with the committee and the stakeholders to make sure we can accelerate the policy work as we've laid out here. With that, Madam Chair, I'm ready for any comments, questions, and direction. Thank
Well,
you.
great work. I think that it's very clear kind of what this committee's job is moving forward, and over the next year, we've got a lot of work to do. So looking to the board members in person to see if there's any questions or comments. Mr. Bass?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, great work and good to learn about the process. I'm curious with the data, and you may have answered this with moving into kind of some big data to inform some of that, but do we update somewhat like the vacancies? So much has changed on the South Shore with regards to the way, for instance, the 11,000 jobs that were at State Line that is now 3,000, and how do we capture those and kind of in that, yeah, to put into that data.
Yeah, do you want to do it, Dan?
Dan Segan for the record. So we update all the data in the RTP. So we have different sources for different types of data that we use. So for occupancy of hotel motels, VHRs, we use the tax records, the TOT reports produced by each of the jurisdictions. For employment data, we have a couple of different sources, primarily from the government. We use the census data to look at population change in use in terms of first primary residence or secondary residence within the region. We get visitation records from a lot of the state parks to do campgrounds. We use big data primarily to ascertain the level of visitation at places where we don't have good counts. So here you're thinking about like Hope or Baldwin, beaches like that, where there's multiple access points. We don't have a good sense, or there's no single count of how many people are going in.
And then I was just curious, and it may not be updated, but I noticed that the farebox recovery revenue for TTD showed, I think, 1.8 and then another number for the later years. And then the Placer County showed 0. So I'm just curious as to why TTD is showing a farebox and the other agencies are not.
Yeah, good question, Nick Haven, TRPA for the record. Yeah, at the time of the development of the RTP, the TDD farebox revenue shown was the fare collection for the Carson routes, the Valley routes. They were actually collecting fares at that time. They actually may still be. So that was what that fare revenue was from.
Great, thank you.
Do you have anything, Mr. Honeman?
Just wondering, with California having these huge budget issues, it's unlikely we'll even stay where we are. And I'm just wondering, are we going to be using this time to look at other sources? Originally you wanted the basin entry fee and that didn't happen, but some more locally controlled leg, third or fourth leg for us to stand on, in addition to state funding, federal funding, and some of those other fare collections. I mean, I would love to see us have another source of funding so we could do a lot of this work faster and bigger and better than what we're doing. So is that something we're going to be looking into at this time?
Yeah, I think over the next, I would say 6 months or so, we're going to be getting pretty deep into that financial conversation. And I think, staff is definitely prepared for that conversation, in addition to getting some basic financial assumptions for what exists now. But where we can go is definitely part of that conversation. And whether it is a regional source or it is more, sustainable local funding, we need to arrive at a game plan for that we can support and document in the RTP. So I would see that in the coming months for sure.
And Madam Chair, if I may add to that explanation from Nick Haven, Julie Reagan, TRPA Director. I will say to your question, Member Henigman, we have expedited that financial element. Initially we were looking to do that, over 6-8 months. We're doing that, as you heard from Michelle, we're bringing that back in the fall because it is so much embedded in the VMT push to get some certainty around dates. So we'll be bringing that back, and that's all wrapped up in the conversation. And, whether that looks at more parking management, holistically, and what are the strategies around that. There's a lot of moving parts in that, including construction costs and forecasts. So yes, the answer to your question is yes.
Great. Ms. Hayes, do you have anything? Okay. What about our committee members online? I don't see any hands raised. And Mr. Bass, do you have anything else? Okay. Then we will now go on to public comment on this item. If a member of the public wishes to address the Transportation Committee on this agenda item, please raise your hand. Or anyone in the room. Would anyone in the room like to address? I don't see that. So anyone online, raise your hand at the bottom of the Zoom screen by dialing *9 on your phone, and you'll be called on and unmuted by a TRPA staff member. And do we have any public comment?
Madam Chair, there are no hands raised to comment on this item.
Thank you. We will close the public comment now. And are there any other comments from the committee? I'm not seeing any. And it sounds like we didn't quite give you any direction because we like what you're doing. So good job. So do we need to make any official motion on this? Okay, great. Then thank you everyone for that. I know this is a lot of work and I hope that this committee helps you with your work. We are now on to agenda item 4. This is discussion and possible recommendation for the approval of the draft fiscal year 2024-25 Tahoe Metropolitan Planning Organization Transportation Planning Overall Work Plan, OWP. Information can be found on 167 of your packet, and I'll be passing it to Ms. Glickert to present.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, Michelle Glicker, Transportation Planning Program Manager. Switching gears only a little, actually, to discuss the Transportation Planning Overall Work Program. It's really our own OWP. Today, I'm seeking a recommendation of approval to the TRPA TMPO Governing Board. Still rolling fast this morning, too much coffee. Next slide, please. As a Metropolitan Planning Organization, we are required to prepare an annual program of work, referred to as our OWP. It identifies all of the transportation planning priorities to be carried out during the fiscal year. The work program describes the transportation planning activities, serving as our budget and direction for expenditures of various federal and state transportation planning funds. The OWP is the transportation planning team's management tool, identifying what we've accomplished and the new tasks for the next year. All of these tasks fold into the annual TRPA work plan and all of our initiatives, ours being the initiative is Keeping Tahoe Moving. In addition to this budget, the budget must be delivered to our funding agencies by May 10th of every year. So we coordinate closely with the finance team on folding this into the overall TRPA budget, which is currently in development. Next slide. So the regional transportation planning budget is shown here with several sources of funding. You may be surprised to see that over 60% of our budget is from federal sources for our planning work. The main federal sources remained about the same from last year to this, and they do include today 2 new sources. We have Senate Bill 125, California State Transportation Improvement Program funds, which I'll go into further within the appropriate work elements. Our total budget was about $25,000 less than last year. And this also includes assumptions on carryover funding from last year to the next. We have to estimate spending of direct costs and staff time by June 30th. So there's a little bit of work ahead of us, and we'll be back probably in September with an amendment also to this when we finalize all of our budgets a little later in the year. The draft budget contains about 6 full-time staff, myself, 2 senior planners, 3 associate planners, and we also incorporate a few others at part-time from TRPA's Transportation Funding and Improvement, Research and Analysis, Communications, and Government Affairs Division, all of that to help us deliver all of the requirements as the MPO. Next slide. So this is a nice snapshot of how those dollars are divided between our work elements. We have about 8 of those. Staff time and direct costs are included, and we have direct costs referred to consultant contracts and or data purchases. So currently we're at about a 60-40 split between staff time and direct costs. This split varies given the year and by work element. This year in particular, preparing for the regional transportation plan, we have a higher percentage of funds going to contracts and data purchases, with the largest of those for the environmental review of the RTP I mentioned earlier. Next slide. So I'm going to walk you through those 8 elements. I'm going to highlight work activities and deliverables. These 3 elements make up outreach and administration. The first, dedicated to administration of the planning program, staff development, essentially building out the work program each year. We also have quarterly progress reports that must be submitted to our federal partners and our 2 DOTs. This also includes funds for training and attending conferences. You heard me mention that. Our budget is about the same as last year for this particular element. Second up is the Transportation Development Act, and this is a major source of regional transit operating funds from California. So this work element is dedicated to our staff under our TMPO authority. This work is to complete administration and management of those funds. Funding, which entails working with each transit agency to conduct unmet transit needs each year. That's for outreach and preparation of a report. It's also about monitoring the productivity and efficiency of transit, ensuring services provided match the needs of the public. This element includes contract funds for TDA financial auditing as well. The overall budget for this element increased about 10,000 from last year with some additional funds from Senate Bill 125 for the administration of new transit funding dedicated to transit and intercity rail capital program and zero emission transit capital program as well. I wish we could do an acronym there, but it's almost too big for that one. But the overall budget increased just slightly. So the last but not least, and this is our public outreach and collaboration with partner agencies, which is really key to our success at TRPA. As I mentioned previously, the outreach for the RTP will be a big focus this next fiscal year. So this element also includes, in addition to all of that, e-newsletters we produce, social media, and implementation of the next public participation plan, which you're going to be hearing about today. And work element 103 also includes our TMPO Tahoe Transportation Commission support, tribal government consultation, working with our federal partners and land managers. These activities support our transparent, educational, and effective regional transportation planning process as the MPO. The element includes funding support for transportation management associations. They continue to be an extension of staff working with our local employers and recreation providers. They've continued to support the Commute Tahoe program, as well as established microtransit on the South Shore, and the TMAs working on the North Shore, expanding van pools, and now on the South Shore, working into getting those van pools going. So we support that, the TMA, with data and analysis as well for those efforts. Next slide. So with regional intermodal planning, this is our largest of our work elements. We've actually divided this year into we have two elements within. The first includes a variety of transportation planning activities that support the development and maintenance of the regional transportation policy documents, including the RTP. Additionally, staff continues to track implementation and works on planning of the US 50 East Corridor Plan, State Route 89 corridor management projects, and Washoe County Tahoe Transportation Plan recommendations, as well as supporting the implementation of State Route 28 corridor improvements. And most recently, this next year, we'll be working and supporting the Myers Area Plan updates, also to ensure consistency. All of this is to ensure consistency with our regional vision. This element also includes Commute Tahoe, a platform for the employers to help with employee surveys, develop guides for employers to build out our regional transportation demand management program. This is in partnership with the TMAs I mentioned earlier. A big part of this element is coordination and planning with our neighboring agencies, El Dorado County Transportation Commission, Regional Transportation Commission of Washoe County, Placer County Transportation Planning Authority. We work closely with them as they're developing their own regional transportation plans. We also discuss travel patterns, larger initiatives like strategies dedicated to new mobility, and even future rail planning and the connections. Next slide. So the second half is dedicated to complete streets and modal planning and programs. This is a variety of transportation planning plans. Oh boy, that's a big one. Such as our regional active transportation plan. Recently adopted our Vision Zero safety strategy, or Vision Zero strategy, and our transportation equity plan. These plans support and implement the regional transportation plan policies. These are also dedicated plans that help our local partners when they're applying for California Active Transportation Program dollars, as well as new federal Safe Streets for All planning funds. A large part of this element is transit planning. This year dedicated funds for passenger surveys and continued participation in this short-range transit plans that are developed by our North and South Shores. Also supporting the integration of public-private partnerships, providing microtransit on the South Shore. So we complete analysis, we support those two, and we'll be developing long-term regional transit for the next RTP. So the other thing that we do in this element is supporting other agency planning work like the City of South Lake Tahoe's Vision Zero planning and destination stewardship region-wide. Next slide. So in the regional intermodal planning is also the transportation data collection and modeling efforts to support the next RTP, many of which I went over in your work program, and general transportation data needs of staff partners, general public, maintaining Lake Tahoe info, transportation data. We have various transportation data sets that address TRPA, federal and state requirements. This element includes bike ped transit data monitoring and model infrastructure updates, a great resource for our partner agencies as well. And then moving into tracking and financial management. This includes maintenance of the 23 Federal Transportation Improvement Program, development and approval of our next 2025 FTIP, and participation on bi-state regional planning working groups, federal programming working groups, grant programs that we administer like the regional grant program. Additional ongoing tasks include project tracking, utilizing Lake Tahoe EIP tracker. We talked about the importance of that this year with the regional transportation plan. Next slide. So wrapping up these last two, under regional coordination, we have performance-based planning, and that includes the continual integration of performance management into our planning work. So it's data-driven decision-making that we continually do. This relates to programming of funds for projects, project selection and sequencing, as well as policy development. This element includes building out an adaptive management planning framework in our biennial transportation reports as part of our new policy adopted with that last RTP. We're going to be bringing that forward in June. A report focused on performance of adopted metrics, transit, active transportation, and of course, VMT, to help us understand the past successes and needs for the regional transportation plan. The first formal draft, as I mentioned, will be coming forward. And next fiscal year, this is going to be finalized through the transportation. Oh, sorry, we got a little off track there. So this element also includes supporting federal performance measure goals for improving safety, which is reinforced by the update of the Vision Zero strategy. And last here is sustainable communities planning funded by California State Bill 1, Senate Bill 1, which furthers the RTP SES strategy to reduce GHG and VMT. The past fiscal year, we focused on EV readiness plan update. We are working on that currently, and that's going to help also with the future RTP GHG strategy and analysis. The big focus this year, hopefully as I get to it, and next will be the transportation technology advancements with an update to our intelligent transportation systems plan. Transportation system management and operations is a great frame for our update. Technology is key to maximizing operations before building more. Parking management, we discuss a lot, is key in our town centers, as well as instrumental in our recreation corridors. So this plan, what was referred to also as TSMO, Transportation System Management Operations, will incorporate intelligent transportation systems, providing a more comprehensive update to that plan and folding it into a more system management, which is really in turn reflects our approach to transportation in Tahoe, corridor management and system management. So this will require more than our usual collaboration with federal and state and our local agencies to ensure we're all aligned on our needs and our priorities. All right, that was a bit more, probably even more than your work plan, but as you can see, we have a lot ahead of us. So during the public comment process, we received comments from Caltrans and NDOT. Our final draft before you today includes refinements to our budget estimates and a little bit of formatting and clarity on staff and direct costs. So with that, the comment period included a hearing at the Tahoe Transportation District. Next slide, please, where we received unanimous recommendation of approval to the TMPO board. And so that leaves us here today seeking a recommendation of approval to the TMPO board. Madam Chair, that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. And the Washoe RTC is actually doing our RTP right now. And they came to present to our board, and I saw that their stakeholders were Reno Sparks and I don't remember who else, but it wasn't Tahoe. And I was like, add Tahoe as a stakeholder, folks. So yes, I think it's great that we're collaborating out of the region because that's the only way we're going to get people out of their cars. So that's great work. And I look to the rest of the board to see if anyone has Mr. Okay, anyone online? I'm not seeing anyone. And I just have a question on, I don't think you use the ITS, Intelligent Transportation System moniker, right? You use, I just forgot what you use. It's,
Well, to be honest, it's what I'd like to see us do instead of have just an intelligent transportation system plan
right.
is actually kind of fold that into a bigger system management operating
Okay.
plan. So a lot of our technology pieces, including the ITS, like what our needs are, which we know we have a lot of needs when it comes to technology, getting and making sure smartphones work in remote areas, all of those things. So the transportation system management operating plan will take into account all of those technology needs,
Okay.
along with some of those parking management pieces. And NDOT does a really nice job of their system management operating plan. So we're working right now on kind of how I want to kind of frame that and roll that out so that it makes a little bit more sense. As you can see, I'm still kind of working through it.
Well, I just think AI is going to be problematic for so many reasons, but going to
Right.
be great for ITS.
Yeah.
In predicting, how people are traveling, using, coordinating lights, making sure people aren't, stuck in traffic, creating more exhaust in the environment.
No, you nailed it. That's it. The idea of the plan is to kind of bring all of those elements together
That's great.
into one kind of coordinated operating plan.
All right. Mr. Bass.
Yeah, thank you for all the information. It's a lot for sure.
It was,
but
yeah.
It's, I'm curious, and this may have been better on the last item, but as we go forward and kind of looking at getting projects into the RTP, I've talked about the gondola many times here that's on the South Shore. And then as I read the compact, it's actually in the compact on page 7 to the utilization of a light rail mass transit system in the South Shore area. And I know it's been talked that the city should do feasibility to be able to get that into the RTP. But seeing that that's actually in the compact as language of what we should be doing, it seems like that would be a task of TRPA. Considering that it's plain language. So curious how, what is the best pathway to getting that into the plan?
I'll take that one. Nick Haven here, TRPA. Yeah, I think I've been here a long time, 26 years, and we've actually looked at fixed guideway twice in the South Shore. Once was more of like because there was a lot of call for like monorail around Lake Tahoe. And we've done some there was some study done back then in terms of feasibility, as well as just the capacity. Like, do we have the users to justify a monorail? Because there's different levels of services, right? It's monorail is even more capacity than light rail. Then you go down to like bus rapid transit. So there's kind of different scales of kind of more fixed systems. And there was some initial analysis on that, and it was determined that the Tahoe Basin, South Shore especially, and that 50 corridor did not have that capacity to justify any of those. Bus rapid transit was close, but in terms of light rail, and the gondola, I think, is a different technology that, is maybe that down near that bus rapid transit capacity that we could look at again. And I'm going to try and dig out some work that a gentleman named Jeff Sparksworthy did looking at gondola transportation actually in the North Shore. So he had actually a proposal that went from Truckee down the 89 corridor into Tahoe City over to North Star, or over to 267 and up North Star. And so there have been some proposals in the past, I think, that can help give us a better sense of, more feasibility, and does it fit with our needs? So we can look into that a little further, but in order to make it into the RTP as a project, as Michelle noted in the prior presentation, you know, there needs to be some level of project delineation with a description, some basic feasibility done, and a cost estimate in order to qualify.
Great. Yeah, I think, and I'm glad to see that, you know, yeah, I can see why the light rail, you know, was way too much for a small place, but the gondola, as you stated, I think will work. And it's starting to, you're seeing it roll out in Park City and all over the place because Doppelmayr has a new technology that works great in urban areas. And I would say that we should consult Doppelmayr because that's who makes most of these type of systems and work with them because I'm sure they would give us a lot of information for feasibility and there's major environmental benefits and things that I just think. And to just put it on the record, when our previous Caltrans director for District 3 was incredibly excited about the project. We now have a new district director, which we'll be meeting with. But again, I just think it's something that if we could get it in the project, I think Caltrans would probably take interest to it. So, or into the RTP, not to the project. Thank you.
Any other committee member questions or comments? Okay, we will open it up to public comment in the room. Are there any public comments in the room? I'm not seeing any, so we will move to online. Please raise your hand now by either clicking the raise hand at the bottom of your Zoom screen or dialing *9 on your phone and you'll be called on and unmuted by a TRPA staff member. Do we have any online public comment?
Madam Chair, we have one hand raised so far.
Great.
Steve Teixeira, if you unmute, you can address the committee.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee, staff. Steve Teixeira speaking today on behalf of the South Shore Transportation Management Association and the Truckee North Tahoe Transportation Management Association to thank staff for the continued opportunity to partner with TRPA. Our cooperative funding agreements are identified in work element 103. You saw them there. This has been an ongoing partnership that we very much appreciate. And overall, we support your action today to recommend forward the OWP as identified by staff in this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public commenters?
Yes, Madam Chair, another hand went up. Ann Nichols, please unmute to address the committee.
Good morning. Thank you. Ann Nichols, North Tahoe Preservation Alliance. There was a lot of generalizations that were hard to follow on this presentation. So when you say like stewardship Tahoe support, are you talking financial? If so, how much? It would be, as I understand it, there is no formal setup for stewardship Tahoe. The Tahoe Fund is the fiscal agent, but there is no formal format of it. So is this just support in just thinking about them, or is it financial? And then as far as the modeling, it would be great to also have your modeling consider evacuation for fire or emergencies, and also snow conditions. That seems to be lacking. I was glad to see that some of your diagrams took into consideration the danger in Crystal Bay on 28 as far as stress level, but it forgot, you changed it to consider that, but it didn't consider the stress level for walking. I'd love to see us all take a walk down Crystal Bay in 28. It's just terrifying. So it seemed like an omission. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public commenters?
Madam Chair, there are no other hands raised to comment.
Okay. Any other committee member comments? I'm not seeing any. Okay, with that, I would love if a committee member wants to recommend adoption of the resolution.
So moved.
Thank you very much. Is there any discussion from the committee on this motion? Seeing none, may we have a roll call vote, please?
Ms. Bowman,
Yes.
Mr. Bass,
Yes.
Ms. Hill,
Yes.
Mr. Honigman,
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion passes.
Thank you very much. We are now moving on to agenda item 5, discussion and possible recommendation for adoption of the 2024 Tahoe Metropolitan Planning Organization Public Participation Plan. Information can be found on page 177 of your packet, and Ms. Richardson will be presenting.
Thank you. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Kira Richardson, Senior Transportation Planner with TRPA. I'm here today to talk about the public participation plan, and we are seeking the committee's recommendation of approval to the TRPA governing board. Next slide, please. So as you know, TRPA is a metropolitan planning organization, or MPO, and MPOs are required to develop a public participation plan 1 year prior to adopting the regional transportation plan. And the public participation plan is meant to outline our public participation process and outreach strategies for the RTP process. So our last public participation plan was adopted by the board in 2019 prior to the 2020 RTP update. This public participation plan also outlines our general strategies for engaging with the public and provides an outreach protocol for certain MPO activities, like updating our modal plans and the FTIP. Next slide, please. So the public participation plan is organized around these 5 guiding principles, and it outlines different engagement strategies to achieve these goals. We recognize that effective public outreach takes significant time and energy, but that it's also the most important component of a successful and effective planning process. Transparency is also critically important in public outreach, and we have built-in processes and procedures to report out on our outreach efforts and ensure that we communicate to the public how we are utilizing their feedback. And I'll talk about that in a bit, but next slide, please. So one of the more significant updates that we've made in this public participation plan is the inclusion of new engagement policies, which were recently endorsed by the TRPA governing board as part of the transportation equity study. So these policies were developed through an extensive public outreach process and are intended to help us improve outreach, particularly to underserved populations, and to help strengthen our relationships with the community. Next slide. So this public participation plan also includes an assessment of our outreach activities over the last 4 years. So this is a snippet of our outreach metrics from 2020 through 2023. And I'll note that this data is only representative of the outreach that the transportation team at TRPA conducts. I think the other departments have their own methods of tracking outreach, but the public participation plan specifically reports on and outlines the outreach activities for transportation planning. So the way that we track also allows us to evaluate our outreach activities each year and then determine how we can improve. But you can see that we have definitely been busy. Next slide, please. So we also used to set targets for some of these metrics in our previous public participation plans. But in this updated public participation plan, we've reevaluated our metrics and decided to move away from setting targets because we felt like the targets that we previously set sort of encouraged quantity over quality engagement. And over the past few years, and especially since we adopted the transportation equity study, since the development of it, we've shifted our focus to quality over quantity engagement. I'll note, though, that the shift does still require significant time and resources, and in some cases, ensuring that we collect quality public feedback requires even more time than if we were just to put out a survey and try to collect as many responses as possible. So, but this new approach is really, I think, going to help us focus our efforts. So we're carrying forward the 4 metrics that we had previously in our plans, but we're not setting specific targets for them. So we'll continue to track the total number of public participants reached through proactive outreach, the total number of participants reached through quantitative methods like surveys, the distribution of public participants who are full-time residents, seasonal residents, visitors, and commuters, and then the total number of primarily Spanish-speaking residents. Next slide, please. And then we've also added 2 new metrics in this public participation plan, and we did actually set 1 target for one of the metrics, which was a recommendation from the Transportation Equity Study. So the first new metric is to track the distribution of outreach activities that are targeted towards transportation disadvantaged populations or within community priority zones. And our target is to ensure that a minimum of 30% of our outreach efforts are targeted towards these communities. And then the second new metric is to track the distribution of in-person, virtual, and hybrid engagement activities. And this is just to make sure that we strike the right balance between where we engage the public. And I think that tracking this will help us assess the effectiveness of different venues. Next slide, please. So I mentioned that the public participation plan also includes our outreach strategy for the regional transportation plan update. And you heard from Michelle and team earlier that we are heading into an RTP update. And so I just wanted to highlight again here the very high level schedule for that update. So we'll be kicking off the RTP officially with the board next month. And then we'll be developing the plan and probably conducting most of our public outreach over this upcoming summer. And we hope to have a draft plan out by spring 2025, and then we'll be seeking the final adoption of the plan in summer 2025. And throughout this entire process, we'll be engaging with the public and with you. And so there will be many different touch points and opportunities to provide feedback on this plan. And we'll have a lot more info on the RTP update coming. So I don't want to bog down this presentation, but just wanted to give you another high level overview. Next slide, please. So before I wrap up and take questions, I do want to mention that we released the draft public participation plan for a 45-day public comment period from February 20th through April 5th. And then we also held a formal public hearing at the Tahoe Transportation Commission meeting on April 3rd. We did only receive one official public comment, which encouraged TRPA to make sure that we're equitably distributing our outreach efforts around the lake. And our updated outreach tracking system includes the location of our outreach efforts. So we'll be able to track that and assess that in the future. But I thought that was a great comment. And then finally, the Tahoe Transportation Commission did recommend the MPO board adopt the public participation plan. And with that, I will be happy to take any questions.
Well, great work. So thoughtful. And I feel like you should go and take this on the road to other transportation organizations because they're not reaching that 30% underserved goal. And I can't wait to see how we do with that. Looking to the board on any questions or comments. Okay. And I don't see anyone online for questions or comments, so I will now go to public comment on this item. Does anyone in the room have public comment on this item? I'm not seeing anyone, so we will now move to online comments. You can raise your hand by clicking raise hand at the bottom of your Zoom screen or dialing *9 on your phone, and you'll be called on and unmuted by the TRPA staff member. Is there any online comments on this?
Madam Chair, there are no hands raised to comment.
Okay, thank you. I will close the public comment. Any other further comments from the committee? Okay, I would love a motion to recommend adoption of the final public participation plan.
So moved.
Thank you very much. And can we please have a roll call vote?
Mr. Bass,
Yes.
Ms. Bowman,
Yes.
Mr. Henigman,
Yes.
Ms. Hill,
Yes,
Madam Chair, the motion passes.
thank you. Great work. We are now moving to committee member comments, agenda item number 6. And are there any other or any committee members who have comments in the room? And I'm not seeing anyone raising their hand online. Well, thank you for a great second transportation committee meeting. And we will now open up our final public interest comments. If a member of the public wishes to address the Transportation Committee, raise your hand now by clicking raise hand at the bottom of your Zoom screen or dialing *9 on your phone. Anyone in the room first? Not seeing anyone. Okay, anyone online?
Madam Chair, there are no hands raised to comment.
Okay, thank you very much. with that, I am looking for a motion to adjourn. Yes, of course.
Madam Chair, because we are right on time. So good job. Julie Reagan, TRPA Director. I just wanted to wrap up and say thanks to the great presentations of our transportation team. And then also just to, again, kind of bookend the big picture with the
Mhm.
wrap up. And if you think about the big picture of being an MPO, Metropolitan Planning Organization, which all the things you just heard about are required in our role as the MPO, and you're going to be acting today in your capacity as MPO as part of the main governing board meeting. We've done our regional transportation plan 4 or 5 times in the last 25 years, but really in the more recent memory, transportation has been elevated dramatically in our community as an environmental issue that's really impactful for our achieving our environmental threshold standards. And overall, these things are linked to land use. So there is a connection to the Regional Planning Committee, which we'll hear later today. The VMT issues are embedded in all of those. So just another contextual piece of how these things link together. And what we've tried to do in this round of the RTP update is bring you these policies in bite-sized chunks. In my 20 years at the agency, in the early days, we would sort of lump all these different plans into the one package. And sometimes it would come unraveled at the end. We're trying to be thoughtful in the deliberation of this committee and using your time to vet issues where there are disagreements and different policy perspectives. Whether it's the Vision Zero strategy, which you've heard before, the public participation strategy that you're going to be advancing to the board, and all those various components that Michelle laid out, so that when we get to the end next year in updating the regional transportation plan, we will have methodically vetted these important policies. So I just wanted to draw a distinction that we're evolving in how we do this. And I think it shows a great level of excellence of our team and how they're being thoughtful and bringing this to you. So just wanted to connect the dots a bit. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes, it's exciting that we get to vet this as a committee and really dig in and get these great presentations. So I feel like I'm learning a lot more this round. Did you have something else, Ms. Clickert?
No, I just wanted to say, I think John Hester would have been very proud.
Oh,
us.
yay. He's here in spirit. That's great. Well, I am looking to the board for a motion to adjourn, please. Thank you, Mr. Bass. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say nay. All right, we are adjourned.